I just read a report that America is now in more credit card debt than ever before, more than $1.1 trillion. You know, my grandfather used to say, there's no stress like money stress, son. Well, are you feeling that right now? Let me help. You've got a friend in the mortgage business in me, and I've helped families just like yours save hundreds of dollars a month. Seriously, we've helped listeners to this podcast save up to $800 a month. At SaveWithConrad.com, we routinely help our podcast listeners consolidate all of their high interest rate credit cards into just one much lower monthly payment. Would you like to lower your monthly payments? Wouldn't it be nice to skip your next 2 house payments? Are you finally ready for some breathing room and peace of mind? Start saving money today with your friend in the mortgage business, me, at SaveWithConrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. You don't need money out of your pocket. And if we can't help you save some cash, we won't waste your time. You see, at SaveWithConrad.com, we don't say no. We say not yet, but here's how. We want to be your mortgage advisor for life. So find out how easy it is to finally get rid of your credit card debt once and for all, get a much lower monthly payment, and even skip your next 2 house payments. Let's find out how much money you can save for free at SaveWithConrad.com.
NMLS number 2129, equal housing lender.
SaveWithConrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff. Eric, what's going on, man? How are you?
I can't wait. I'm living off the Top Guy buzz from this past weekend in Huntsville, so I'm riding high.
Man, it was such a great time. So awesome to hang out with you, and awesome to get to spend a little bit of time just brainstorming with you here in North Alabama. It's been a minute since you've been to North Alabama. That was a fun visit, man. I'm glad you got there.
It was a fun visit. And I was really excited to see your lake house. Really excited to see that. And you and Megan have done a great job with that house. I know a lot of work and time went into it. What a beautiful place. Beautiful setting. I don't know, man. If I was there, I told you when I was there, I don't know if I lived there, if I'd ever leave the property. I would make everybody just come to me.
Well, we had a lot of fun having everybody come to us last week. Man, what a time it was watching the Royal Rumble with all of our folks from AdFreeShows. Efren does such a great job with the Top Guy Rumble, and there's so much drama there for that. I mean, it's one thing to watch the Royal Rumble. It's another to watch it with your friends. But when you're watching it with your friends and Wrestlemania tickets are on the line, that was pretty fun, wasn't it, Eric?
That was talk about some stakes, man. People took it seriously. It was a lot of fun. Had a blast. Efren is amazing. Efren really needs to have his own game show. I don't know what that is, but there is no justification for Efren not having a high-profile game show gig. He's really awesome. Such a great personality.
Huge personality, and I agree. Undiscovered talent there. I do want to ask you your feedback on the Rumble. Of course, we saw, I guess it's the 3rd most commercially successful WWE show of all time, something like that. Only behind night 1 and night 2 of WrestleMania last year. Otherwise, this is the biggest show in history. Over 65,000 folks, the biggest gate, the most sponsorship. You know, listen, I know it sounds like a broken record with all the success WWE's been enjoying, but I don't think even I had it on my bingo card. If you would have said to me last year at WrestleMania, hey, you know, besides today, next Royal Rumble will be the most successful WWE event in history. That would have just, well, that can't be. It can't be bigger than all those other WrestleMania main events, but it happened for a Royal Rumble. Are you shocked by this, Eric?
Yes and no. I don't, shocked isn't the right word. Amazed is. Amazed is a good word. I'm amazed at the growth, the success, and just the velocity of all of the positive things that are happening in WWE. I think, you know, we talked a long time back when the TKO merger first reared its head, and everybody speculated about the synergies and how it would affect WWE and what new opportunities may come our way. And I don't think any of us had all of this on anybody's bingo card. It is just amazing how fast they're growing. And I think Netflix internationally is only going to accelerate that growth. It's pretty fun to watch. Parts of me, Conrad, deep down inside, if I'm honest with myself, I'm envious. I'm not jealous. That's a different thing. But I envy those people who are involved at any level, but particularly on the creative side, on the management side. When your job is to improve and grow and expand, that's a lot of pressure. How many times have you heard me say it's a lot easier to create momentum than it is to maintain it?
Yeah.
And I think what we're seeing here is just an amazing, amazing, I hate saying this word, but synergy in a way that nobody anticipated. You talk about the sponsorship, you talk about the venues that they're able to leverage now, and so many things are happening so fast that I envy those who are involved. I don't know that I'd want to do it. That's why I say jealous isn't the right word. I wouldn't want to, if I could go back in time 25 or 30 years ago, yeah, I would, just to be a part of it. But at this stage of my life, man, I'm digging just watching it. It's so satisfying to see the industry growing and expanding. Makes me even more proud to have been in it at one point. So it's all good, man. I'm just excited for everybody there.
I'm excited too. It was a fun show to watch. And of course, we always get our mixed bag reviews online after. I think some people were disappointed in the predictability that Charlotte Flair returned and won the Rumble. But maybe some of those same people were upset that they didn't get what they predicted with John Cena winning the Men's Rumble. Instead, it was Jey Uso. And I even saw chatter online when people were saying how disappointed they were that Jey won. And I kind of couldn't believe that based on the merch reports we've seen and live reactions he's gotten and the way the crowd has responded to him. And then we saw the in-ring promo from both Charlotte Flair and Jey Uso on Monday night. And I felt like Jey was pouring his heart out and the fans ate it up. And well, maybe when Charlotte tried that, the fans weren't very receptive to that. What do you make of these responses to our Royal Rumble winners, Eric?
Oh, I find it interesting, trying to figure out the psyche of the internet wrestling community is always a fascinating journey into the abyss. But I think it comes down to I think it was Raj posted something online that if you booked for the internet wrestling community and to satisfy them, you'd be out of business very quickly. And I think what that says to me, the way I interpret that is, and we've always talked about this, you have such a small percentage of the audience that is active online. I'm not talking about casual viewers like me who check in every once in a while on social media just to see what's going on and kind of keep their finger on the pulse a little bit. I'm talking about the people that spend 6-8 hours a day commenting on professional wrestling, most of whom have accomplished nothing in their lives, really don't have much going on personally or professionally. And they're very quick and they're very loud to be critical because that's how they get that's their dopamine hit, is being negative and critical. But unfortunately, that very, very small percentage of the audience tends to make the most noise on social media. So you really can't, you want to listen to social media a little bit, you want to follow the trends if there's a trend, certainly. But to try to create an event or I hate to use the term book, but creatively to produce a show like Royal Rumble and hope that you're going to make the internet happy, good freaking luck. And if you do, you're probably going down the wrong path. I've said this before about Dave Meltzer, and I used to say this all the time back in the 90s. If you want to give yourself the best chance of success, do the opposite of what Dave Meltzer proposes. And the odds are you're probably going to be successful more often than you're not. And that's true with the wrestling community. And Raj pointed that out, I think, in his tweet, is you can't book for them. If John Cena would have won the Royal Rumble because everybody predicted it, then you would have had a whole bunch of people on the internet. Oh, I can't believe John Cena's a part-timer. He's not even full-time. Somebody else deserves that spot. I mean, you know the garbage that you'd be reading, right?
Yeah.
So you just, like I do, you scroll through your social media and you laugh and you chuckle. Sometimes you'll see something that'll make you go, maybe. But 99% of the time, it's just garbage takes.
Well, we hope that we have a little more than some garbage takes today. We're going to be watching an old episode of Monday Night Raw, and we'll hope you'll join us. Of course, you can see one of the more iconic episodes of Monday Night Raw if you go seek out February 7th, 2000. It went down February 7th, 2000 at the Reunion Arena in Dallas, Texas. Do you think of, Dallas as being a wrestling town, Eric?
I don't. And I know there's so many people going to be pissed off at me for saying this, but please understand. Dallas, that market really, first of all, I wasn't even aware it existed as a wrestling fan. Again, this was back in the territory, back in the days of the territories where someone like me who was in my teens or late teens, early 20s, and I'm a wrestling fan. I live in Minnesota. That's all I see. There was no wrestling on cable back then. There was very little. There were no dirt sheets. There were, the wrestling mags are wrestling mags. I never read them anyway. So you were kind of isolated in terms of what you knew and who you knew about. It wasn't until really I got to Atlanta. Now, before I got to Atlanta, obviously when I was with the AWA, became very familiar with a lot of the territories and their promoters, and worked with some of them, by the way. So it's not that I didn't know regional territories existed back then. It's just that I had no familiarity with them until much, much later. So when people talk about wrestling hotbeds, where do I go naturally? I go to Minneapolis for obvious reasons. That's where I got my start. The long list of top talent in this industry, Hall of Fame level talent that started or came through or were developed in the AWA, including, by the way, Hulk Hogan. To me, that was the hotbed until I learned about the impact of Florida and how much was really going on here in Florida in some of the, again, same level, Hall of Fame level, WWE Hall of Fame level of talent that were involved in Florida that had such a significant impact. So when people talk about the hotbeds of wrestling, Dallas isn't one of my go-tos for the reasons I just explained, but clearly had a big influence on the industry.
Well, I want to do a PSA right now for anyone who rents. If you haven't heard of Built, you're about to thank me. Earning points on rent is now a reality when you pay your rent through Built. You don't even have to check with your landlord to start earning points that you can use towards flights or hotel stays, fitness classes, even your next rent payment. Let me break it down for you. There's no cost to join Built, and as a member, you'll earn valuable points on rent and on all of your everyday spending. Built points can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, and even the ones you haven't heard of. There are over 500 airlines and over 700,000 hotels and properties around the world where you can redeem Built point towards. Built points can be redeemed towards future rent payments and unique experiences that only Built members can access. So if you're not earning points on rent, my question is, why not? Start earning points on rent you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/83 weeks. That's joinbilt.com/83 weeks. Make sure you use our URL so they know we sent you. That's joinbuilt.com/83 weeks to start earning points on your rent payments today. So, Eric, I'm looking forward to this. We're going to have a lot of fun watching this episode of Monday Night Raw from way back when, February 7th, 2000. But before we jump into that, I do want to ask you about, what you've seen with WrestleMania and what your guess is for WrestleMania right now. We mentioned that there were some fans who were less than enthused that John Cena didn't win. I was happy to hear that they've already announced he will be at the Elimination Chamber at the Sky Dome in Toronto. Hey, if you're going to have a John Cena farewell tour, bring him to all your big dome shows, even international ones. It makes sense. So I see why they maybe saved that, but there's lots of speculation. What's Cody going to do at WrestleMania? What's Roman going to do at WrestleMania? What's CM Punk going to do at WrestleMania? What's Drew McIntyre going to do at WrestleMania? Eric, if you had to put your fantasy booking cap on, do you see any clear path that you think no matter what, they've got to do this? Does that exist? Is there a must-see match this year?
No, I don't think there is. I think WWE has done such a good job of mixing up the very top of the roster so that it's very hard to predict and anticipate. Everybody has, it's kind of like John Cena winning the Rumble. Everybody's invested. Oh, I think John's going to win. And maybe they wanted him to win. Maybe they didn't. I don't know. But it's the prediction. They're invested. They've made a decision and a commitment. And they've done WWE has done such a good job of keeping so much potential and possibility in terms of matchups that it builds anticipation, just like we have right now. What's going to happen when you can get, again, I'll go back to what worked for me and what didn't work sometimes. But one of the things that always worked for me was believing that if your creative is successful in getting people to speculate, if you can get people to ask questions, you own them. It's when they're not asking questions because they don't care that you're really in trouble. And I think there's so many possibilities. I still think The Rock's showing up. I do. I don't know how it's going to fit. I don't know where he's going to go. I don't have any idea what the story might be. But I will be surprised if Rock isn't somehow heavily involved. No reason for it other than a gut instinct. And my gut is usually often, I would say often more correct than me, thinking through something. My instinct says Rock's coming back. So we'll see. Beyond that, no idea.
I think Rock being involved creatively from a storyline standpoint makes a lot of sense. Are you suggesting you think we actually might see The Rock wrestle at WrestleMania?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, when I say, do I think there'll be an official match with a bell? 2 bells, one to start and one to finish? I don't know. But I see strong physical involvement and meaningful interaction, whatever that interaction is, whether it's physicality. He's going to throw a monkey wrench into something. I just don't know what it is.
I agree with that. I do think that we have not heard the last of The Rock this WrestleMania season. On the ladies' side, does anything jump out to you? I mean, there is a fork in the road here. We don't know exactly which direction Charlotte's going to go and the other opportunities that creates. Does anything jump out as a marquee matchup on the ladies' side, do you think?
Not so much for a matchup, but I do think there will be a full-blown heel turn for Charlotte. You kind of see that coming in some of her promos and some of the stuff I've seen online from her. I think she's going to embrace her heeldom, which I think will be awesome for her. Because I think she's a much more natural heel than she is a natural babyface. I think the heel thing will come so easy for her, and she will become so comfortable with it that will be her destiny.
I also wanted to ask you, any sort of news and notes, if you've been keeping up with anything happening on the AEW side of things. Of course, we know we're on a countdown to their big show in Australia, which I guess once upon a time was in a stadium, and now it's in an arena. And I guess that's created a lot of discussion. And I think some fans, maybe once upon a time, hoped that this might be a pay-per-view, although I don't technically think AEW ever announced anything like that. I do think fans sort of jumped to the idea that, hey, this is going to be a premium live event. Now, they've loaded the card up. Maybe it's not as heavy as a pay-per-view, but they're making it feel like more than just a TV show. But it is going to be a Saturday night special, but I guess they're still calling it Collision. And I saw Dave Meltzer recently talk about this, and he said perhaps just calling it Collision hurt. Maybe he was insinuating that, much like you sort of grew to not love the idea of Thunder. And by grew, I mean hated it from the very beginning. Well, Dave is freestyling. Do you think just the brand name Collision has been damaged to the point where maybe fans in Australia aren't excited to see it because it's called Collision? That to me was like, wow, I never even considered that fans may have lost confidence in just the show name. Is that a real thing, Eric, already at this point, do you think?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that has anything to do with it. I think, look, whether AEW intentionally allowed people to believe that this was going to be a pay-per-view, and you can allow people to believe whatever they want to believe if you don't want to correct them, or if your marketing and your promotion is intentionally ambiguous and vague. It's easy to understand why people in Australia, fans, who reacted initially to the, oh my gosh, 50,000 seat, stadium show, this, I got to be a part of that. And they took the leap themselves. Well, this must be a pay-per-view, because who would just do a Collision, which is a C show for TBS or TNT, whoever has it, I don't even know, nor do I care, because it doesn't matter. It's easy to understand how fans allowed themselves to believe that this was going to be a big stadium pay-per-view show and they were going to be a part of something special, because that's the way it was projected and presented. And now you find out that, well, it's not going to be a pay-per-view. I know we never said it would be, but we didn't say it wouldn't be. And we understand you just assumed that it was because it's in a stadium and it's in Australia and blah, 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 blah. But to go from that to a smaller arena and now making it clear, which they should have done in the very beginning, because now people have a pissed off taste in their mouth, right? They're pissed off because they felt like they were deceived. They weren't. They deceived themselves. But, that's a little bait and switchy, to be honest. And Dave was one of the ones that, and rightfully so, I'm not criticizing him for this, but the minute there's any change in a card or a schedule, particularly if it's at the top, his go-to was always, false advertising, very misleading. Well, that's kind of what's going on here. But now that they've come out and said, okay, we're going to move to a smaller arena, it's not going to be a big stadium show. Sorry, folks, we overestimated our own popularity. So we're going to move to a smaller arena so it doesn't look like shit. Oh, and it's going to be called Collision because, well, it's a Saturday night TV show that nobody watches.
Well, no, hang on now. You're getting real negative. But I mean, they called this from the beginning Grand Slam Australia. And if you recall, when they first started using the name Grand Slam, it was because they were running Arthur Ashe. And that was just a quote unquote regular TV show where they would double up a taping. They would do a Dynamite and a Collision. But you got, 2 nights of Grand Slam, but it just meant, hey, it was a cool venue in Arthur Ashe, which is a tennis stadium. And I liked that they called it Grand Slam. So I kind of never assumed that it would be a pay-per-view, but there was speculation when they first announced this. Oh, well, that's after the first of the year. Might this be a max special? I mean, I don't think we're that far away from AEW pay-per-view being a thing of the past, and maybe they're all max specials. It feels like that's the way the industry's going. So I guess I'm not piling on AEW here. I was really shocked to hear that maybe Meltzer felt like the brand name of the show was damaged because, like, I know you weren't high on Thunder, but I think most rank and file, ticket buying, casual wrestling fans just saw Thunder as a quote unquote WCW show. No, it wasn't Nitro, but it was a WCW show. I get that Nitro would be the A, but just the idea that there was a brand name of a show that he felt like was second tier already with AEW. I don't know, that it feels like a weird thing to be disappointed in. I would be happy if I'm getting my first show in Australia and they are going to give me a good card. And I don't know. It feels like at times we look for things to be upset about. Like, well, we thought it was a pay-per-view, but no one said it was. And they've been running Grand Slams in America using that same name. Like, it feels weird to me, right?
Not to me. And I think, again, going back to Dave is always looking for new excuses. new reasons, new spin, to avoid the reality that AEW as a brand is deteriorating right before our eyes. So it's Dave's go-to it's not AEW. It's not the fact that they didn't promote the show well. It's not the fact that they shouldn't have announced it in the first place. It was a bad decision to begin with. There's a lot of reasons why this thing should have never occurred in the first place. But Dave wants to assign causation to the name of the show versus the fact that the company and the brand fucked up. They just did. Whatever goodwill they had in Australia, some of it's going to be diminished because of just the bad taste that they've left in people's mouth because of changing the venues and whether it was fair or unfair, allowing people to convince themselves that this is going to be a pay-per-view. None of that has anything to do with the fact that AEW is struggling, and this is the result of it. I don't think the name of the show, I think we're trying too hard to justify disappointment. It is what it is. There's very weak television in Australia. We've talked about this before. One of the reasons that AEW was successful in the beginning and was able to put whatever it was, 15, 18, 20,000 people in Arthur Ashe, whatever it was. I remember when it happened, I was extremely ecstatic about it and posted all kinds of stuff on social media, putting it over and putting Tony over because it was really quite the accomplishment. It's a new company, a new brand. But with that new company and with that new brand is new anticipation, new hope. And at that time, 2019, there were a lot of people looking for an alternative to WWE wrestling fans, hardcore wrestling fans. Well, now they've got it, but it's not much of an alternative, and it's just kind of atrophying before our eyes.
Well, we're all going to be paying close attention to see what happens. I, for one, am looking forward to seeing AEW for the first time in Australia. You went to Australia with WCW. Did you consider that? And I know there's a rich history of wrestling in Australia. We mentioned earlier that you didn't really think of Dallas as a wrestling town. Do you think that Australia represents a big opportunity for wrestling as a whole, just as a genre?
There's certainly a market for it there, but Australia is kind of hard to get to unless there's going to be a local promoter or a promoter in Australia that's going to be able to build a promotion and have weekly television and stabilize over a course of a couple, 2 or 3 years. I don't see anybody other than WWE being able to drop into Australia once or twice a year and be successful doing it. WWE can for obvious reasons. They've been in the marketplace for a long time. They've got an established history there. People know what to expect. But other than WWE, I don't think we'll see TNA making its way to Australia anytime in the next 10 years or any other wrestling organization for that matter. It's number one, it's really expensive. Flying a crew and production and everything else to Australia is incredibly expensive. That fact alone makes it prohibitive for mid-size or small promoters to say, let's go over to Australia and see how that goes. Without television, without established weekly television, wrestling on any kind of regular basis is never going to work in any market.
Well, let me tell you what's going to work for you. Tecovas Crafts, quality Western boots for everyone, from generational ranchers to lifelong cowboys and, hey, even first-time boot buyers like me. You see, anywhere worth going is worth going in good boots, so go find your perfect pair with Tecovas. These folks were born back in 2015, and man, Tecovas makes it easy for anyone to find their perfect boot. Every one of Tecovas boots are handcrafted with over 200 meticulous steps for broken-in comfort right out of the box. Whether it's a long day or a big night, your Tecovas are built to last and impress. And that's why Esquire loves them and says, there's a reason we keep coming back to Tecovas. And this has been a game changer for me. I just recently discovered how much everybody in my family loves Tecovas because I got Dad 2 pair for Christmas. And now Mom has a pair. And now my sister's looking at a pair. Everybody loves the way they look in Tecovas, and you will too. And if you've ever wondered if you can pull off boots with your personal style, well, you owe it to your feet to pull on a pair of Tecovas. Plus, with Tecovas Best in the West guarantee, man, you get free returns and exchanges for 30 days. And right now, you can even get 10% off at tecovas.com/83weeks when you sign up for email and text. That's 10% off at tecovas.com/83weeks. Tecovas.com/83weeks. See site for details. Tecovas. Point your toes west. So listen,
hey,
Eric.
Before we go, I just want to shout out. I just went over to the comments. Josh Henney's here. Josh, it was great seeing you again, man. Matthew Presley, Isaac Risson. Isaac, man, it's been a minute. I hope you're feeling better. Not feeling too good today, but really want to thank everybody from AdFreeShows, the top guys and gals who showed up and just had so much fun. And every time I go to one of these, I'm so grateful that I'm a part of it. So thank you, Conrad, and your team, and everybody that showed up, because it was a blast.
Man, I had a blast. It was a lot of fun, just to catch everybody up. We have a couple of get-togethers for AdFreeShows.com every year. We have something called Top Guy Weekend, and then we have Top Guy Rumble. Well, Top Guy Rumble was this past weekend, and we combined it with a wrestling fantasy camp where you actually got to go in the ring and roll around with Jerry Lynn and learn how to lock up and run the ropes, and it was really, really fun. And then after that, we booked our own private independent wrestling show. We got to play the booker and put together an entire card and run some matches. And it was just a blast. We had game shows and opportunities to win Wrestlemania tickets, a comedy show, a double taping of wrestling. Really, really great stuff. But before, I could just drone on about it, let you hear what other people are saying about the time they had at Top Guy Rumble.
Amy from the great state of Kentucky. And I've been a top gal for a few years, and I have made some of the best friends that I have ever had. And here I've gotten to spend time with them here at the Top Guy Rumble. We have had an absolute blast. The last 2 days have been really exciting. We have, number one, again, all got to be together. We got to talk to Jerry Lynn. We got to do fantasy camp. We got to get in the ring and show us some basic moves. And then we got to put together a match. We got to meet independent wrestlers, and we got to ring announce. We got to be managers. We got to be the timekeepers. We had commentary. We had a show, and we got to put that on. But just the fact that I'm in here hanging out with all these guys that love wrestling just as much as I do is worth every penny that I spend. If you love wrestling, you need to do it. Like, this is a community beyond anything that's out there. And I just really feel like if you were to put the money towards being a top guy, get these experiences that you're going to love. How many people can say they got in the ring as a wrestling fan and was taught by professionals on how to do, different moves and lockups and show you the right way to do it? I mean, I know a lot of people that do fantasy football camps, and they go to, they do the NASCAR and all that kind of stuff. You don't have that lot for wrestling. You have it here, and it's professionals, legends. Like I said, Jerry Lynn was here, and he walked around with every one of us, and he interacted with us, and he talked to us, and he showed us how to do things not to do, and why you don't do it. I mean, you just don't get that anywhere else. And I just think that it's worth every penny. It's just worth the money. And plus, not only the experiences, it's who you get to do it with. Whether it's you bring a partner or the people that you meet here. I just think it's worth every penny.
Wrestling fans, Dream Weekend. Be sure to be a part of it next year. Join us over at AdFreeShows.com. I want to encourage you, try using our promo code TOPGUY50. It's going to give you a little hookup, save you a little bit of cash, but man, you get to be a part of the community here. You get to be a part of our live studio audience. You get all the pods early and ad free. Over 100,000 hours of bonus content you can't catch anywhere else. Plus, you get live interactive Q&As and watch-alongs, stuff that never makes the main feed here. You also get free quarterly gifts, and you get to be a part of this community. We hang out a couple times a year, and I just can't stress how fun it is. Go check it out. You're going to love it. It's adfreeshows.com. All right, Eric. So we're going to do a little countdown and then we'll get going. Here we go. We're watching Monday Night Raw from 25 years ago, February 7th, 2000. in 3, 2, 1, play. And here we are, the old iconic open. Man, does it feel like it's been a quarter century ago, Eric? The year 2000?
It seems like 2000 was yesterday. It's such a head trip. It really is. Whenever we do one of these shows, we go back in time and say, oh, it was 15 years ago or 20 years ago. Some of it seems like a lifetime ago, and some of it seems like last night. It's really incredible.
It's incredible to think about how much wrestling and the entire industry and the people in it have changed, but some things remain the same. Like we see Dean Malenko in the ring right now, and we know behind the scenes he's a coach for AEW, and Sean Waltman still making regular appearances, and we just saw Triple H. He's going to be a big part of the show. We know he's steering the ship. Isn't it interesting that for so many, this becomes a lifelong career? Like, that is not the case in traditional sport. You know, I mean, most folks are in the NFL for a handful of years, and then that's in the rearview mirror. But pro wrestling affords itself to be, you know, a decades long career for a lot of performers. But I don't even really think that most of them maybe even consider, what do I do post active competitor? Is there still a place for me in pro wrestling? And it's nice to see this from 25 years ago and realize, wow, there's a lot of this influence still felt in the industry today.
Yeah, I was thinking about Triple H the other day. I mean, if you look at the last 24 months of this cat's life, maybe 36, I mean, his life has been pretty amazing up till that point. But to go through everything that Paul Levesque went through to end up where he's ended up. And, oh, by the way, we're going to put you in the Hall of Fame too. It's like, I don't know what the next 2 years are going to look like, but it's setting up to be kind of a letdown with all the stuff that's been going on in his life that have been, it's been amazing. That's the only word I can think of. And I wonder if Paul ever thought about what's in this business for me after I get done in the ring. You know, do you go in, do guys go into the industry thinking, okay, this is going to be my career for a lifetime? Or is it more like, wow, I get this opportunity to do this now and I'll worry about what comes after. But here with Triple H, you got a guy that worked his way up. I mean, he started in WCW, for crying out loud, yeah, and made his way to WWE. And it wasn't necessarily a super high profile player, certainly not in the beginning. It wasn't like he was pushed down anybody's throat. I think towards, you know, over the last 7 or 8 years prior to Paul retiring, I think he was shoved down our throats a little bit. But the guy really does study the industry, not just from a wrestler's perspective, but from the business perspective. I used to, you know, hear people refer to him as a student of the game, and okay, that's a cool gimmick. It's not a gimmick with Paul. It's real. He does study the business. He knows its history. He understands the audience. He understands the business of the wrestling business. And now he's surrounded by some of the most powerful, influential, successful, and experienced people in media and entertainment. And a guy like Paul is only going to learn that much more. So his future is obviously very bright. I kind of joked about the next 2 years, but what an amazing journey this cat's been on.
What do you make of, I don't know if you saw this, but when it was revealed last week that Triple H would be the headliner in this year's WrestleMania, I did see some snarky comments online about, oh, Vince would never allow anyone to put him in the Hall of Fame. And Hunter's had the seat for a year and he's already a mark for himself. And I was like,
oh, God.
Why are we doing that? Like, are you arguing that this guy's not worthy of the Hall of Fame? Like, there's no argument. There's no basis for that argument. Like, it was really a head scratcher to me. Like, can we have any positive news without there being some negativity attached to it? Or is that just
not in wrestling? You can't. Of
Okay.
course not. Of course not. Wrestling is all based on emotion, or it should be. And logic, unfortunately, doesn't factor in too much. But can you think of anybody? I can't think of anybody off the top of my head if I'm being objective. But let's be clear. It's not like Paul Levesque and I are tight, right? I'm not here putting over my friends, so to speak. We're friends, more friendly than friends, but it is what it is. But can you think of anybody right now who is more deserving of a Hall of Fame nod than Triple H?
Right.
I can't. And you can argue the timing. You know, DePaul, I don't know if he knew about it in advance or not. It's hard to say. I could understand, though, how Paul, when he found out, kind of went, oh, maybe this isn't the right time. Because you don't want to lose any goodwill. You want to keep that audience behind you and supportive of you. And right now, I think the vast majority of actual wrestling fans, people that watch it on a regular basis, who aren't internet wrestling community marks, I just can't think of anybody that's more deserving. But unfortunately, you're going to always have that loudest 2% of the audience or 5% of the audience that's going to jump on the internet and bury anything and everything. I guess you can't really react to that. You just got to move forward and do what you think is best and do what you think is going to create the best emotion, the right emotion. And if the internet wrestling community shits on it, so be it. Who cares? It doesn't really matter what the IWC thinks, because they're not thinking, they're reacting based on emotion.
Well, we're seeing a pretty emotional promo here. Of course, we are just 1 week into this Radicalz move. Just a week prior, all of a sudden, the Radicalz showed up on WWF programming, and man, it was the talk of the industry. We know that they wrestled on SmackDown, and unfortunately, Eddie Guerrero broke his arm on a frog splash. But now we're seeing an in-ring promo here from the Radicalz. And talk about bad luck, man. You make your big jump, you got your big moment, and in your very first match, you break your freaking arm.
God, can you imagine what was going through Eddie Guerrero's mind at that moment?
No.
I mean, leaving WCW, there was a lot of, and I wasn't there, obviously, so I can't speak from experience or perspective, but based on everything that I've been told by people who were there, that was a very emotional decision for all three of these guys, or four of them, to leave WCW and jump to WWE. Talk about jumping into the unknown and the abyss, and then you finally get there and break your freaking arm. Man, that had to be tough on Eddie.
When you here comes Mick Foley now, and it said here Benoit wanted to thank the man that brought them here, Cactus Jack. So here he comes, but before he can say anything, well, Triple H and Stephanie, they're going to rear their ugly heads here as part of this story. The whole, you weren't there, but you were certainly keeping tabs a little bit on what was happening. And when you see this movement of not just one guy, because, well, respectfully, we'd seen that before. We'd seen Waltman go from the WWF to WCW and back again. We had seen Jeff Jarrett go from the WWF to WCW and back again. So we had seen some of that before. And of course, most famously, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. So none of this is really new, but it feels different when there's four of them. Did it feel like the beginning of the end, or the straw that broke the camel's back? Was it a significant point in the road when the Radicalz jumped, or was it just business as usual at that point?
No, I think it was definitely significant to me when I heard well, first of all, I told the story before. I won't go into it again here too much, but the week before, Lori and I were flying home from Minneapolis. We'd spent the night in Minneapolis, dropping off my brother and sister, and we were going to leave the next morning, and we were sitting in a Chili's or Applebee's, whatever restaurant, and the monitors were up on the wall. I could see Monday Night Raw, but I couldn't hear it. Obviously, we're in a restaurant. And I remember sitting there, and when we saw that camera shot of those four, I looked at Lori and said, this is big. And I said to her, I will not be surprised within 30 days if I don't get a phone call asking me to come back, because it was such a big move. And it came at absolutely the worst time for WCW. WCW was a cracked egg, just waiting to spill its guts out. It was broken. It was fractured. There was no leadership. The creative was a mess. Turner Broadcasting wanted to make it go away. And amongst all of that drama, 4 of your top guys, and they were the cruiserweight division, Eddie, Dean, Chris, Perry, to a degree, not to the same degree. Those guys were front and center on Nitro for a long time. And as a part of the cruiserweight division, and Benoit went on to have, great matches outside of the cruiserweight division. I think that made it a more significant move, and that is why it didn't fall into the category even of a Scott Hall and a Kevin Nash at that time. When Scott Hall and Kevin Nash came over, yeah, it was a big deal. It didn't become a really big deal till later on. But I think this move, in many respects, from a business perspective, was more significant. It was the nail. I think it was the nail in the coffin. I really do. Once I saw that, I was like, there's just no way. They can't come back from this.
We're seeing Triple H here with the, it looks like a brand new world title. It looks fantastic. And we've got a very young Stephanie McMahon, 24 years old, I think, when we're watching her here. When you think about, it was often talked about in this era, and certainly in the 5 or 6 years that passed this, that, hey, this is going to be the power couple of the future. And this is around the same time you started to hear people say that, oh, Triple H is trying to saddle up to the boss's daughter. But I mean, all of the conspiracy theorists, all the naysayers, all the haters, it's really hard to argue with Triple H's success right now. And I know that he's still got a lot of really loud critics out there, which I kind of scratch my head about. Like, I don't know what he could do better at this point to prove that, he's trying to be an advocate for pro wrestling and he cares about the industry. And yeah, he does represent a positive change from Vince McMahon. But even that negativity, Eric, people were still talking about it back then. Do you think, and I know this is a long drawn out way, but to ask this question, do you think perhaps Triple H has a little bit of residual heat from the way Shawn Michaels was perceived? Because for so long, Shawn Michaels was viewed as a guy who had a bad attitude, was difficult to work with, and he tried to mess with guys in the clique, and he was just a menace, and maybe sometimes he had some personal stuff going on, and we've just heard a lot of negativity about
absolutely true, by the way, all of which is factual.
But we don't hear that about, like we didn't hear that Triple H had substance issues and some of the challenges that some others did, but it often feels like he gets painted with some of that same negativity. And I'm wondering, is that because they didn't like Kevin Nash, or they didn't like Scott Hall, or they didn't like Shawn Michaels? How did it get on Triple H here? Is it guilt by association?
Probably a little bit. I think a lot of it has to do, though, just with the narrative, again, within the wrestling community. And none of those people who knew Paul Levesque or worked with Triple H, the character, nobody really knows him. I don't really know him, for crying out loud. As long as I've known him, I don't know him well at all. So you end up listening to what other people say. You try not to. You may even consciously be aware of the fact that it's too easy to pass judgment or have an opinion, not even pass judgment, have an opinion of somebody without ever having any contact with them. And the narrative and look, Paul, the reason you've never heard about his substance abuse problems is this guy doesn't drink and he doesn't smoke. He doesn't do drugs.
That's right.
I mean, he's kind of, you talk about straight edge. This cat, I remember the first time I ever was with him in a social environment, it was at Diamond Dallas Page's house. It was a Christmas party for wrestlers. So you can imagine what was going on in his house. I mean, there was no debauchery of any kind, just people partying and drinking and doing what people do at Christmas parties. And I looked over at Paul, and he's sitting there with a bottle of water. Everybody, and he's having a blast. Don't get me wrong. It's not like he's sitting there kind of, oh man, I'm the only one here that's not drinking. This is kind of miserable. He was having a blast, but I noticed he was drinking water when everybody else was pounding whatever they were pounding. And I think with Paul, much like others who have been successful in the industry, there is always going to be resentment, either from other talent or in some cases fans, people that write about wrestling. There's always going to be a bias there. And when you have 20 years, 15, 20, 25 years of people spreading the rumors and kind of framing someone as selfish or manipulative or greedy, it takes hold. It becomes fact just because it's been repeated so often. I shouldn't say fact. It becomes the narrative that everybody accepts, even though
it's a legend. Yeah,
it's not a fact at all. Is he different? Sure. Did he have to work really hard to protect his character, to protect his position? Sure. Guess what? So does everybody else in the business today. Absolutely. Everybody in the business today has to watch out for themselves. They have to protect their own character. They have to do what's right for them or what they feel is right for them. You've got to balance that, with the fact that you're getting a check and you have a contract and there's only so much influence you have. But to be aware of your position, to be deeply involved in your creative, to want to understand the process and why you're being asked to do something is all part of the business. But I think in the case of someone like Paul Levesque or anybody else, maybe not everybody else, but so many other people that have reached that top level, there's always, but he's really a dick. He only got there because he's really selfish. Paul Levesque only got that job because he married the boss's daughter. All of that garbage becomes reality, in fact, in the minds of a lot of people that just should know better, but don't.
It's just weird because I never even really considered that until recently, because I was having a conversation with someone and they lumped him in with the clique, and they said, well, it's what people always say about him. And I'm like, well, what did they say? Because we've heard reports of, Scott Hall or Kevin Nash or Shawn Michaels in that era. I don't recall hearing any specific sort of quote unquote bad behavior from Triple H in that regard. And I just found it interesting because then in a more modern era, it's like maybe he took some blame for the Vince McMahon stuff. And I just feel like it's just guilt by association. Like when I really try to pinpoint, now don't get me wrong, there's some creative differences along the way where I would have said, well, I don't know that I would have done it that way. But as Jeff Jarrett always reminds us on his podcast, Eric, creative is subjective. And man, we can get out there with some crazy ideas. And maybe if you're looking to get some out there ideas, can I recommend Vea? Yeah, man, it's a new year, 2025, new year, new you, new possibilities. Don't let those bad times of 2024 bring you down. This year, reach new heights with Vea. Trusted by over 500,000 happy customers, Vea is the Swiss Army knife of wellness, dedicated to harnessing the natural benefits of hemp to create high-quality wellness products. Whether you're looking to improve your sleep, your focus, your recovery, maybe just add a little pep to your step, or maybe you just want to get high, Vea has something for you. With products ranging from 0 to 100 milligrams of THC, Vea gives you the power to blaze your own trail. Vea is well renowned for their award-winning THC and THC-free gummies and vapes. They've even got THCA flower, soothing topicals, and calming drops. It's all crafted with the highest quality hemp sourced from trusted, independently owned American farms. And the best part is, Vea legally ships to nearly all states in the United States, all in discreet packaging directly to your door with a worry-free guarantee. There's no medical card required. So if you're 21 or over, check out the link to Vea's website in our description and use the code 83weeks for 15% off. And if you're new to Vea, you even get a free choice or a free gift of your choice. I'm a big believer in this. I've been using this product for a while. They make it really, really easy, especially for a novice like me. I want to remind you, Vea's products range from 0 milligrams to 100 milligrams of THC. So if you're nervous about, hey, I don't know that I should take THC, 0 milligrams are for you. Maybe you want to start and you just want to try out, you can work your way up. Or maybe you're an old pro like friend of the show, Shuli Agar. Man, he knows what he wants. He wants the big daddy. Well, Vea can cover it all. They're known for their premium THCA flower. It's grown indoors in a state-of-the-art facility, It's harvested at peak TCH or THCA levels, rather, to emphasize a more natural aroma and flavor. And the THCA flower strains are grown with care and then rigorously tested to ensure the highest quality, free from harsh pesticides or nasty chemicals. But don't take our word for it. These guys are the industry leader. As I mentioned, more than 500,000 customers served, all farmed and crafted with care right here in the United States. Vea is the only lifestyle hemp brand. Go check it out. You'll be glad you did. You'll love their award-winning service. You'll love their quality ingredients. But I love that it's premium products that fit our budget. So if you're 21 or over, check out the link to Vea in our description and use our code 83weeks. You'll get 15% off. And if you're new to Vea, get a free gift of your choice. After you purchase, they're going to ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. This year, enhance your everyday with Vea. So listen, we just set up a big match here. That entire opening segment, which is 20 minutes and running right now, turned into the Radicalz making the jump. And hey, we're thanking Mick Foley for setting this up. And of course, well, Mick Foley gets left laying in a heap. The Radicalz are raising their hands with Tori and X-Pac and Triple H and Stephanie. And now we've got a collision course for No Way Out. It's Hell in the Cell, and Mick Foley's career is on the line. What do you think about those? You know, I know you're big on stakes, Eric, but a career match just being made in a promo like this. You went to this kind of early in the Hulk Hogan Ric Flair feud. In 1994, you set all kinds of records with Bash at the Beach. And we know that you're going to try to run it back at Halloween Havoc. Maybe it's stalling compared to what happened in July. So we make it, hey, Rick's going to put his career on the line. We knew we were going to bring him back. I know you're big on stakes, but this retirement stip, it's a stake that almost no one believes. Did you guys kill that stipulation? Was it already dead when you found it? What do you think of that retirement stip, Eric?
I don't think we killed it because it still exists, unfortunately. But I know I've said this a lot over the years, but sometimes you learn more from mistakes than you do from success. And putting one's career on the line probably falls into that category. It's an easy go-to because the stakes are relatable. It should matter, but as you pointed out correctly, Conrad, nobody buys it. You're setting up stakes that nobody believes are going to be true, or they're not. It's not real. And I remember Ric Flair. Now, Rick was a challenge at Halloween Havoc. That was, I think, it took place in Detroit. We had Muhammad Ali there, and it was a great night. A lot of great boxing. Tommy Hearns was there. Sugar Ray Leonard was there. A lot of great boxing talent was there that I was excited to meet. But Rick was beside himself. And he was beside himself for a couple of reasons. One is Rick wasn't exactly sure what his contractual status would be afterwards. And he was concerned, based on his history, that he could be put in a position where he loses any leverage at all. And I kind of understood that, but I didn't accept it because I knew what I was going to do. There was no way I was going to take advantage of Rick and be forced into a retirement match and then not re-sign him. That was never going to happen. Ever, ever, ever going to happen. I wouldn't be that manipulative. But Rick was also concerned that these are stupid stakes. Nobody's going to believe I'm going to retire. And he didn't want to be involved in something that he knew the audience wasn't going to buy into. Now, I didn't realize it. I didn't give that conversation with Rick enough weight at the time, but it's one of those things that I learned, not once, but twice, is just not a good idea. You want to create stakes that are believable. You want to create stakes that people say to themselves, consciously or subconsciously, this could matter. This could affect his career. This could affect whatever. But to have fake stakes like that is a bad decision. It's probably always. Now, here's an exception. If we knew, for example, that Ric Flair was on his way to Tibet and he wanted to become a monk and he was never coming back, then great, do it, because then it's real and it matters. But to set a guy up in a retirement match that you know is coming back, it just pisses the audience off. They know you're just fucking with them, and they get hot about that. So don't do it. I learned that the hard way twice.
I like when you can drop a little knowledge here. Hey, let's talk about what we're seeing on the show here. We're seeing the Dudley Boys just plowing Edge and Christian through these tables. We also saw one of the most over acts in wrestling in the year 2000. The New Age Outlaws out here doing their rap. Did you ever get a chance to catch the New Age Outlaws? What'd you think of their stuff? The idea of Road Dogg, and I mean the former roadie, one half of Jeff Jarrett's act, and Billy Gunn, one half of the former Smoking Guns. It felt like these guys were just sort of drifting along aimlessly as the roadie and rockabilly, and they come together and it becomes a happy accident. Brian James is an entertaining son of a gun, and man, they were over like Rover in 2000, seemingly out of nowhere. And still to this day, people know the entire rap all the way through. Were you surprised how well that caught on?
No, I wasn't. No, I really wasn't following Road Dogg or Billy Gunn too much. I wasn't really that familiar with their careers, so I didn't have an opinion one way or the other until I saw them together. And I think together, especially now, after so much time has gone by, you can look back and I think, at least my opinion, that these two individually, for whatever reason, just but together it's like 1 + 1 = 4. And the chemistry, they had fun working together, and it's always a big factor, right? If you enjoy the people you're working with, if you enjoy the chemistry and you can feed off of each other, there's nothing more fun. And if you're having fun, like we're seeing right now, if you're having fun in the ring with your character, it's pretty hard for the audience not to have fun watching you. Firm believer in that. If you're in a match, if you've got a tag team partner, for example, that you just prefer not to see until you absolutely have to, the chemistry is not going to be there. You're not going to enjoy it, and neither is the crowd. But every once in a while, you connect two people that, otherwise maybe would have been lukewarm, and the magic happens because the chemistry happens, and all of a sudden you've got a superstar team on your hands. It's pretty awesome.
It is fun to see how the tag team division in WWE is changing. This is an interesting time because for so long, tag teams have not been a priority with the WWF. But now you take a look, and all of a sudden, you got the New Age Outlaws, you got the Dudley Boys, you got Edge and Christian, you got the Hardy Boys. If you had to think about the heyday of WCW tag teams, is there one? I mean, this feels like maybe one of the bigger booms for WWE tag teams, but was there ever a WCW tag team era, Eric?
I think in the early 90s, WCW tended to rely a lot more on tag teams. Certainly, you think of the Steiner Brothers, Harlem Heat, it's two of the most prolific teams in WCW, two of the most prolific teams in professional wrestling, for that matter. Were obviously a big part of WCW, but when I started getting control of WCW, particularly during that period of time where I spent a year, 2 years cutting costs, I just took out a calculator and went, wait a minute, I've got to make a decision. Are we going to build the tag team division, or are we going to pare it down, reduce the size of it? And it was just a financial issue, as I'm sure it has been with WWE over the course of their history. There are times when you just look at your roster and you look at the math that comes with it and you go, wait a minute, if I'm going to have a tag team division that actually matters, and it's not just a filler match to break up the monotony of singles matches during a 2-hour, 3-hour show. But if you really want to build a tag team and get a tag team over, they're going to need a bunch of opponents. They can't go out there and wrestle each other every week. So now you're building a segment of your roster that has twice the cost of goods, in this case, talent, is twice as much than you're going to have in a singles match. And it just becomes a math problem. But for that reason, I personally got away from tag team wrestling because it just didn't fit in the budget, to be very honest, in the beginning. Now, later on, 96, 97, 98, the financial issue wasn't as big of a deal. But by that time, we kind of minimized the tag team division over the previous couple of years, and it just wasn't high on my list of priorities. And I would imagine WWE has gone through that again, who knows how many times over the past 30 or 40 years. You just got to look at the numbers and go, oh, this isn't working. I got to make a change.
I do want to ask you about the Dudley Boys. We see them out at the commentary desk with Jerry Lawler and Jim Ross. I know you've become big buddies with Bully Ray through your experience in TNA and years since, but way back when they were in ECW, once upon a time, it felt like a lot of talent left ECW and came to WCW. Guys like Stevie Richards, guys like Raven, guys like Sandman, guys like Bam Bam Bigelow and Mike Awesome, on and on and on. The Dudley Boys opt to go to the WWE. I guess my question is, was there ever any discussion that you recall with yourself or Kevin Sullivan or Terry Taylor or any member of the team about the possibilities of the Dudley Boys in WCW?
Not that I remember. That would have been a Kevin Sullivan thing. Kevin and Terry Taylor both were pretty not focused, but they were very much aware of what was going on in ECW on a daily basis. So there might have been conversations between those two. There may have even been a conversation between Bully and Devon with Kevin Sullivan or Terry Taylor. I don't know, but it never came to my desk.
I, for one, am a huge Dudley Boys fan and always have been, and can't imagine that I won't be, because I just loved all of their ECW stuff. But I did not imagine that they would enjoy the success they did in the WWF. I didn't think Vince would push guys in tie-dye t-shirts and shorts, and I just thought, they're not his cup of tea. But they enjoyed a lot of success there. And I wonder, when you think about their importance long term, because I've heard some people say, oh, they were just a modern Nasty Boys. And I thought, well, that's a compliment. I liked the Nasty Boys back then too. But I do see the Dudley Boys and all their success as being a more viable up the top of the card tag team than I do the Nasty Boys. When you think about the Dudley Boys legacy, what do you think of, Eric?
Tables.
Yes.
Just tables. Every time I see, and what was it it was last fall during the NFL season, maybe during the playoffs, when guys were putting each other through tables, or people out in the tailgate area have tables set up, and some of them were on fire, and guys were jumping off the back of pickup trucks and onto their flaming tables. Where did that come from? That was the Dudley Boys. They really made the table spot. I know other people have done it. They probably did it before and maybe did it better, whatever. It doesn't matter. The Dudley Boys made it famous. And I can't see a table spot today without thinking of them. But, a couple of things I want to say. First of all, Devon, amazingly talented guy, a fun person to work with, always positive, very, very talented.
Universally loved.
He is he's one of those people that when you see him from across a convention center or arena, I personally will go out of my way and walk through a big crowd to get to him just to say hello, because he always makes me feel good. I always feel like a shot of energy every time I just shake his hand and say hello.
Yes.
And you look at Bully. I was just watching Bully last night on a clip on social media. He's doing a Busted Open radio show with Undertaker. We talked earlier on in this episode about, guys that are able to extend their wrestling careers after the ring time is over with them. And Bully is exceptional on a mic. I always knew he was good on a mic. I knew that working with him in WWE is when I first met Bully. Certainly working with him in TNA is where we became really close friends, I think, during that period of time. I knew then he was really good on the mic, but he's got a real feel for what he's doing now on Busted Open. I'm just cannot be happier for his success. He deserves it. He is focused. He's got a tremendous work ethic, and he's bursting with talent. I can't wait to see where he goes.
I can't wait to ask you about Kurt Angle in WCW, but before we do, I want to remind you that the start of the new year is the perfect time to get organized, set the goals, and prioritize what really matters most. And to me, a top priority is always going to be financial wellness, and that's why Rocket Money can help you make your goals feel more achievable. They show you all of your subscriptions right in one place, and they can easily help you cancel the ones you forgot you've been paying for. You see, Rocket Money pulls together all of your spending across all of your different accounts, so you can clearly track your spending habits and see where you can cut back. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel those unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and even lower your bills to help you grow your savings. When you see all of your subscriptions in one place, now you know exactly where your money's going. And for the ones you don't want anymore, well, Rocket can help you cancel them. Rocket gives you a dashboard that gives you a clear view of all your expenses across all of your accounts. You can even easily create a personalized budget with custom categories to help you keep your spending on track. You're going to be able to see your monthly spending trends in each category so you know exactly where your money's going. And you get alerts if bills increase in price, maybe there's unusual spending activity, or if you're ever close to going over the budget. The new goal, and this is really cool, there's a new goals feature. It will automatically save money for you so you don't have to think about it. Maybe you're trying to pay off credit card debt or put away money for a house or just build your savings. Well, Rocket Money makes it easy, and they can even help you try to negotiate to lower your bills for you. They automatically scan your bills to find opportunities to save, and then you can ask them to negotiate on your behalf. How great is that? They deal with customer service. You don't have to do any of this. Rocket Money has over 5 million users, and they've saved their users over $500 million in canceled subscriptions. We're talking saving members up to $740 a year when they use all the app's premium features. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/83weeks today. That's rocketmoney.com/83weeks. rocketmoney.com/83weeks. So listen, we're watching a battle in 1996 here. That's what it feels like. Mark Henry, who was in the Olympics that year as a lifter, he is in there right now with Kurt Angle, who we know won the gold medal in 1996. Now, I bring all of this up because those Olympic Games in 1996, well, they're in Atlanta. When all of that is happening, is it ever on your radar? Do you have anyone like a Jerry Briscoe? I mean, I know Briscoe did it for the WWF, but was Kurt Angle even on your radar when he was in Atlanta in 1996?
He was not. He was not. 96, I was so focused on other things. We had plenty of talent. I wasn't actively pursuing talents. Actually, it was the obvious. It was the opposite. Talent was pursuing WCW.
Yes.
So I really wasn't looking, to be honest.
Did you remember ever having a preliminary conversation or discussion about Mark Henry, about Kurt Angle, or about anyone on that Olympic scene? I guess I'm just trying to see, was there some sort of a pipeline or discovery process like we had with Jerry Briscoe on the WWE side? Was there anyone like that? Because we've heard, I mean, you've told us before that Kevin Sullivan had his ear to the ground in ECW. Was anybody looking in amateur sports?
No.
Okay.
No, and that was clearly a mistake on our part. You know, the only one example I can give you of a decision I wish I would have made differently in this regard was Verne Gagne called me. I don't remember what year it was. I'm going to say 95. Could be off on that. But Verne Gagne gave me a call and said, hey, you got to look at this kid, Brock Lesnar. Verne was very active in the University of Minnesota amateur wrestling program, stayed very close to the coaches and the team and supported them financially and in other ways. And Verne called me and said, this kid is amazing. And he's a big kid. He can move. And he gave me all of Brock's credentials. And I thanked Verne. But at that time, it might have been during the cost-cutting phase of my career, I wasn't looking for talent that needed to be trained and turned into a star. I was looking for people that had equity from day one. So I let that one go. Not that I could have signed him anyway, perhaps might have been able to, but I would have liked to have given that a try, to be honest.
Take a look at what we're watching right here. Just so, yes, that is Mae Young taking her top off on Monday Night Raw. And of course, Mark Henry he's nervous because, you know, this is his baby's mama. He's got her impregnated here. Why are you laughing at that, Eric? That's the storyline. Mark Henry has impregnated.
It's the storyline. There's nothing wrong with it. It's wrestling. It just makes me laugh.
What's your favorite pregnancy angle in wrestling, Eric? Got a favorite?
I can't think of one. Can you help me out here? Was there others?
There's been so many, and I've never enjoyed a single one. I don't understand why it was ever a topic the second time.
A fragile, pregnant woman, vulnerable, needs a hero. And I understand the premise of it, but yeah.
Well, can you explain the premise of Mark Henry getting Mae Young pregnant?
Vince McMahon. That's just a Vince McMahon thing. He loved that quirky shit. Was this Mark Henry's sexual? Yeah, this was his sexual chocolate era.
Yeah, this is when he impregnates Mae Young, and she's going to give birth to a hand, Eric.
Yeah, I remember the giving birth to a hand gimmick because there was a lot of conversation about that. But did you see the shape Mark Henry was in that shot?
Yes.
I mean, you know, you see this guy walking around today, and he's a massive dude, and but you just know he's strong as shit. But look at him here.
Yes.
I mean, he looks like he could throw a car over a cliff. What a monster. Again, super nice guy. Have you met him?
Yeah, great guy.
Great guy. Really smart too. You ever have an opportunity to sit down and really get into an extended conversation with him about anything that doesn't have anything to do with wrestling, you'll be amazed how well read, how smart he is. He's a really, really bright guy.
We've talked a lot about football. We've talked a lot about Bobo Brazil. I mean, Mark's a good dude. I got to know him a little bit from hanging around WWE and AEW. And of course, he's doing a fantabulous job over on Busted Open. And now I'm watching John Bradshaw Layfield, one half of the Acolytes, just beat the ever-loving snot out of Crash Holly here. Man, I've had a lot of fun doing Bruce's podcast with JBL these last couple of months. And this is a pretty ass-kicking match here, man. You've got the Hollies, Hardcore Holly and Crash Holly, against the APA. Man, I don't know that there's two people I'd want to mess with less, I think, than Bob Holly and Ron Simmons. Look at Ron Simmons helping himself to a little beer tap love there. This is hilarious.
It is fun.
Well, the APA as a presentation, did you get it? Did you like, Ron as a badass tag team? Because we've seen Ron as part of Doom. We saw him as a single star, obviously WCW World Champion. But it just works for me, Ron, as a part of a tag team, whether it's Doom or it's APA or it's the Nation of Domination. I kind of dig that for Ron. What do you think of that presentation?
I do too. Well, I've always been such a massive fan for Ron from day one, my first day on the job at WCW. Look, when I first got to WCW, nobody knew who I was. Very few people knew who I was or where I came from or why I was there. And then once it became obvious, well, he's an announcer. He's a backup to the backup of announcers. Whenever anybody would have to do an interview with me, it was usually not that important of an interview. It may have been for one of the syndicated shows or maybe, the Sunday night TBS show, things that just weren't really priorities for either Jim Ross or Tony Schiavone because they both had a tough workload. So I would get it. And then inevitably the talent would go, I get the C Squad guy. So evidently this isn't that big a deal. So guys would do it. They knew they had to do an interview or they were doing it with me, and they would show up and it would get through the interview. But you could just tell, it's like, oh, I get the new kid? The fuck? I'm not good enough for Jim Ross or Tony Schiavone anymore. Now they're giving me to this kid? The fuck? Nobody ever said that, but you could feel it, right? Not with Ron. Ron was the exception to that rule. It's almost like he knew how awkward I felt and out of place I felt, and he went out of his way to make me feel really comfortable with him. He was not intimidating at all. He was just a classy performer and a pro. Became friends with him afterwards, still friends to this day, but he's one of the few people in the very beginning at WCW that he didn't take me under his wing by any stretch of the imagination, but he went out of his way to make me feel comfortable when a lot of people didn't.
Well, here's another one of your pals coming down to the ring. Chris Jericho is the Intercontinental Champion, and he is going to wrestle Viscera. There's been a lot of jokes, that I guess really since the beginning of 83 Weeks about, oh, Mabel was the third man nonsense. But did you ever meet the real life Viscera at any point? The real life Mabel? Did you ever meet him?
I don't believe I have, or did, I should say.
Yeah.
My apologies to his wife. But I don't think I ever did.
So, Eric, I wanted to ask you, in an alternate timeline, in an alternate universe, if Mabel had come around, if Viscera had come around in, say, the mid-'80s and not the mid-'90s, is there any doubt in your mind that he would have been in main events against Hulk Hogan?
No, absolutely none. He would have been cast perfectly for that position because Hulk liked larger-than-life characters and heels to work against, and Viscera certainly would have fulfilled he would have checked every one of those boxes. Absolutely.
You just think about, all the big guys that he had matches with, whether it was King Kong Bundy or Andre the Giant or Zeus or, any of the big lumbering figures that, we needed a heel factory, whether it was Akeem the African Dream or the One Man Gang, or it was the Big Boss Man, or it was Earthquake. We need a big fella to work with Hulk Hogan. And man, what a look that we see Viscera had. And how about that? At 6'10", 500 pounds, I think that was like a spinning heel kick or wheel kick, whatever it is. It's a lot more agile than you imagined for a nearly 7 foot, 500 pounder.
Quite the athlete, for sure. What did he pass away from? Do you recall?
I don't, but I'll take a look at that.
Because he passed away very young.
Yeah, he was 43 years old.
Wow.
We got to spend a little bit of time and talk about what's going on in the rest of the wrestling world. We know later on this program we're going to see Luna and Miss Jackie, and we haven't spent a ton of time talking about women's wrestling. I do know that Luna was with WCW just for a cup of coffee. I know that Miss Jackie was actually there before she was here. Why don't you think there was a better fit with Luna in WCW, given her relationship with Kevin Sullivan?
I don't know, other than there was just never a lot of meaningful room on the roster for women during the WCW era, all the way up until the day it closed. Yes, there were women on the show. Yes, we had women's matches. Yes, we had Medusa. Yes, we had some other, we brought in some Japanese women that put on a hell of a show, but there just wasn't the depth of talent necessary to sustain women's wrestling on a regular, consistent basis in a way that was compelling. We just didn't have the talent. So I'm sure it was frustrating for people like Luna and even people like Kevin Sullivan that were trying to create those opportunities, because again, you just didn't have the women to work with. It's not like we could fly women over from Japan every other week, so that we could have women's matches. It was just cost prohibitive. And there wasn't like there is today. You go to the WWE Performance Center, I was there a month or so ago, and you walk through the back, you look at all the people training, and I would say 50 to 60% of them were women, which is awesome. And by the way, they're all Division I athletes, incredibly talented people. But that wasn't the case back then. You had an occasional women's wrestler would come your way, but it was more of an attraction than it was a meaningful roster position.
I've always been fascinated by Luna, and I think it's interesting when you take a look at her WCW experience, what that looked like. You may not even recall, but she worked a dark match against Medusa in April of '97 in Philadelphia. And the result is she got a pay-per-view match against Medusa the following month, Slamboree in Charlotte, North Carolina, in May of 1997. And in June, you guys used her on 3 international tours as you made your way through Deutschland. But it was Medusa and Luna over and over and over again. With the benefit of hindsight, do you think you were so overzealous to maybe that's the wrong word, but you were so excited to have this moment with Medusa and the belt that what are we going to do with her once we have her here with the title was almost an afterthought? Because it does feel like she almost had no one to work with the entire time.
So, good question. However, the whole, to suggest that the only reason, not the only reason, but perhaps my focus wasn't so much, okay, Medusa's available. She's a great talent. What do I do with her? What is her program? Instead of thinking along those lines, your question suggests I was thinking more, well, what the fuck? I don't really care what we do with her. As long as she comes over and drops the belt in the garbage, we're good. That whole dropping the belt in the garbage was an afterthought. And it was Medusa's idea, not mine, by the way. She'll go to her grave telling everybody it was my idea, probably because she doesn't want to get on the bad side of WWE again for another 15 years. But it was her idea. I hired Medusa because she was a friend and she was talented. And when she called me and said, hey, I've just been let go, is there any room for me there? The way I would with anybody who was a friend at that time and a talented person, and if there was room in my budget, I would say, yeah, get here, we'll figure it out. Now, I can be criticized for that. That's probably not the best way to make a decision, but I knew she had talent. I was familiar with her because I had worked with her back in 1987. We started working together. So because I was so familiar with her, I knew she was a talent and she was a friend. Sure, I'll make room for you, Medusa. We'll figure it out. Oh, and by the way, I'm bringing the belt. That's kind of how that went. So was I remiss in not trying to determine what I would do with her once she came to WCW? Absolutely. But it wasn't because I was overly motivated about dropping the belt in the garbage. That would be misleading.
Well, something that we're both pretty fired up about is Magic Spoon. You know, as a kid, I loved eating cereal, but as an adult, we realized we don't need all that sugar and we really need more protein. And that's when my wife found Magic Spoon. Man, it's a nostalgically delicious cereal that tastes just like my childhood favorites, but with a ton of protein. You see, every serving of Magic Spoon cereal has 13 grams of protein, 0 grams of sugar, and 4 grams of net carbs, so you can feel good about what you're eating. The most popular flavors are fruity and cocoa, but there's so many more. And Magic Spoon's brand new treats are crispy, crunchy, and airy. It's an easy way to get 12 grams of protein on the go. And for the first time ever, Magic Spoon treats are available in grocery stores with delicious flavors like marshmallow and chocolatey peanut butter. But my favorite is the double chocolate. I just finished off my last box. I've already re-upped, and I want you to get $5 off your next order at magicspoon.com/83weeks, or go look for Magic Spoon on Amazon or in your nearest grocery store. That's magicspoon.com/83weeks. You'll get $5 off. Magic Spoon
goes great with Via too, by the way.
We just saw Gangrel here, and of course we know in real life he is the real life husband of Luna Vachon. And he's been around wrestling for a long time, and some of these characters have become iconic characters. Like we're watching the entrance right now that a lot of fans believe to be maybe the best entrance of the Attitude Era. Gangrel coming up through the Ring of Fire on the stage. Everybody loves that Brood theme song. I get that this is an out there persona, but man, something about vampires and vampire movies. I mean, whether it's the Lost Boys or Twilight, it feels like, or what was that True Blood HBO show? America was obsessed for a while with vampires. What did you think of this presentation from Gangrel, a wrestling vampire?
Not my cup of tea, personally, aesthetically, creatively. However, I recognize that it worked. And I think one of the reasons that it worked as well as it did is because of David Heath, Gangrel. He lived that gimmick. He still does. I saw him a year ago in Australia. I was there for an event, and he's still wearing the fangs during public appearances, autograph signings and things like that. He's still living that gimmick in a way. He's an interesting cat. You want to talk about taking a trip, sit down and have an hour or two conversation with that guy. If you really want to hear some crazy stories, particularly about Luna, get Gangrel on a show sometime. Maybe we should do that. I mean, really fascinating guy. I mean, he's been around a lot, and just listening to his story growing up as a child and where he grew up, it's a wonder he's still alive. Fascinating guy, really.
It's going to be interesting to see what you think of our main event, because I don't know that you've seen this before, but it is going to be quite a spectacle in this episode of Monday Night Raw. It's Triple H and Sean Waltman and Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, and Perry Saturn. They're going to be taking on Cactus Jack, and we'll see who else. But first, we're seeing Luna and Miss Jackie do their thing here. We know that these are serious professional wrestlers here. This is not the Divas era. I mean, Luna and Miss Jackie would not necessarily be described as those types. I mean, they were traditional ladies wrestlers. Why do you think that switched? Because we did have Medusa and Jackie and Luna. We didn't have a lot of wrestlers, but we did have lady wrestlers. And then all of a sudden it feels like there was a switch overnight, and it became about, hey, we need Playboy models, and it doesn't matter if they know how to wrestle.
I don't know. I wasn't there, but based on conversations I've had with just about everybody that was Stephanie McMahon was the one that, pressure may not be the right word, but pressured, for lack of a better one right now, Vince into using women in a more athletic way so that they were on equal footing, so to speak, creatively with men, and we're not just there to give birth to hands or, provocative sexual stuff, flashing her tits in the ring and all the stuff that worked so well. That was the Attitude Era. You can go back and look at the clip of Triple H encouraging some woman to flash her tits on TV. That was what it was. It was all about the sexual innuendo. That was the core of the Attitude Era. That's what shocked the 18 to 49-year-old audience out of watching Nitro into watching WWE, because there was some crazy shit going on there. But I think that probably wore itself out after a while. There's only so far you can go. There's only when you're even as wild as things were back then on television, and as much latitude as everybody had, there were still limits to what you could do. And I think after you spent a year or 18 months exploring all of the options you have to push the envelope sexually, as far as WWE did, you get to a point where, okay, well, let's try that. Oh, we did that 2 weeks ago. I know. We'll set up a scenario where this happened and this happens and then this happens. Shit, we did that 3 months ago. You just run out of rope. And perhaps it was that. Perhaps that was the catalyst for Stephanie to go to Vince and say, perhaps we need to do things differently with women and attract a broader female audience, because that was also a big part of the business of the wrestling business. Is there was a time when advertisers, it's not today, because 18 to 49-year-old males are, as anybody that reads Variety magazine or multi-channel news knows, the key demo that everybody likes to talk about like they know what the fuck they're talking about, is 18 to 49-year-old males. Back in my day, advertisers were a little leery of a program that was so dominantly 18 to 49-year-old males, and they were looking for more females. So perhaps it was driven by economics as well. And USA Network said, hey, look, I get it. We're attracting a big male audience, but we need more females. How do we get them? Not by, bringing out Playboy model wannabes wrestling in their underwear or crawling around on their hands and knees in a thong with a bark collar on. Maybe we need to present these women as athletes. Maybe they need to be aspirational characters for young women. Maybe then more women will watch the show. Seems to have worked. But I don't know what the catalyst was, to be honest. I wasn't there.
I just think it's interesting to see how the evolution of women's wrestling has changed. You remember seeing those old posters from way back in the day, where in the territory days, it would list all the individual matches. And then at the bottom, it would say, and this isn't the language we use now, plus midget matches and girls matches. So those were like two added attractions at the bottom where they didn't necessarily get specific on names, but they knew, because we've heard from Dusty Rhodes types say before, hey, a wrestling show should be like a buffet. There's something for everybody. And that's the way the women were positioned, as this special attraction. Now they're a more regular part of the show. I mean, now there's conversation about, hey, we didn't have any women's wrestling in hour 1, or we didn't have enough wrestling in hour 2, or whatever it may be. There is a big advocate for more women's wrestling on TV. What I wanted to bring up to you, though, is I find interesting that whereas that became more in fashion, it feels like little people matches are no longer acceptable on mainstream television. But I know for sure there's multiple tours going around that do really, really well. And do you think there is ever going to be an opportunity where we see, I'm not going to say a little person division, but a more regular place in mainstream professional wrestling for little people matches? Or why is that so out of fashion? And I understand that there is a political sensitivity and that sort of thing, but I could almost go the other way and say there's a lot of really passionate wrestling fans who happen to be little people who want to live their dream and be a professional wrestler. Aren't we kind of oddly discriminating against them by not allowing them? It feels weird to me.
It does. If you take the current kind of public attitude towards things, and we're not talking about political correctness, although I know what you mean by that. I think we're talking about societal correctness, and I think society has just gotten to the point people are easily offended, and many people feel like, for example, if I'm a little person, and I'm one of those people that you're referring to, and my dream is to be a professional wrestler, and I'm training and I'm getting as many independent shots as I can, trying to develop my skill. And I go to a place like WWE in particular, or maybe even AEW because they're on a major network cable outlet. You're going to have management of that network. They're going to be more sensitive to the societal implications of something like using little people, because you're going to get resistance at that level. Nobody wants the heat. And I think that's what we're experiencing now. We have in this country over the last several years, is nobody wants any negative press. No, everybody is so afraid of social media and being called anything with an ist at the end, that they won't go near it. And it is unfortunate for if I was a little person who had that dream. I'm probably not going to get that shot unless I'm traveling around in what is a modern day version of a traveling circus as a part of a group of other little people. Now I'm gonna call them midgets because I actually produced a midget wrestling show, and the midgets that I worked with were not offended by being called midgets, just for the record. Not a one of them. Not a one. I don't want to say they were proud of it, but I think several of them that I worked with and got to know a little bit kind of were proud that they were able to get as far as they had gotten, and proud of the fact that they were going to be on television just like anybody else would. But because of our culture, they're probably not going to get that opportunity to be on a main stage. And the other part of that is you have to be careful if you're going to use someone, a midget wrestler, a little person, for those of you who are still so sensitive. You got to be careful you don't do it with, it can't be comedic, because now you're making fun.
That's right.
Now you're laughing at. Would there be anything wrong with seeing two little people going out there and tearing it up? Absolutely not. Would it be perceived culturally as a negative? Probably. At least enough so that network executives are going, not that. We don't want to go there. But it's really just because of social media and everybody being so fearful of it.
Rock just did a promo talking about poontang pie, Eric. Did you ever think you'd hear people talk about poontang pie here on the program?
No. I remember hearing that word for the first time, or that reference, back when I was a little kid. One of my cousins was talking about this girl he was dating and hoping to get some poontang. I didn't know what it was. I asked my dad, what's poontang?
Oh, God.
Don't ever let me hear you say that again. You say that in front of your mother, she's going to slap you right in your face.
Godfather's got 6 ladies here. I think, respectfully and affectionately, he referred to them as his hoes. And now, as we're talking about Rock, talking about poontang pie, and we've got the Godfather here with his ladies, feels like a perfect time to mention that today's show is sponsored by BlueChew. BlueChew is the original brand offering chewable tablets. And we want you to roll this fatty for that pimp daddy. This erection enhancing tablet is going to help men achieve stronger, harder, longer lasting erections. And BlueChew is putting its money where its mouth is. They're giving you a month free. The process is simple too. You just sign up at BlueChew.com. You consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. BlueChew's tablets are made in the USA. They're prepared and shipped directly to your door, and you can take them anytime, day or night. So plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. And the best part is it's all done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversation, no waiting in line at the pharmacy. So make your life easier by getting harder, and discover your options at BlueChew.com. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Try BlueChew free for your first month. That's right. Try your first month of BlueChew free. Just visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank BlueChew for sponsoring today's podcast. So what do you think of the presentation of the Godfather character with the quote unquote hose? I mean, is there any scenario where you could have gotten this approved through standards and practices in WCW?
Depends on when. I think in the mid 90s, even 96, 97, probably could have got away with it. By 98, 99, definitely not.
So instead of working on Godfather and Val Venus, instead of having your own porn star and pimp, you just went with Mortal Kombat instead.
Yeah, I went with Glacier.
Yeah. I mean, really, when you think about it, doesn't that make so much more sense?
Blood runs cold, brother. Blood runs cold.
Unfortunately, so did the Angle too. Well,
I set myself up for that one.
This is a fun match. We got the Dudley Boys taking on Godfather and D'Lo Brown. You know, Godfather, of course, is a regular part of what we're doing at AdFreeShows.com. Cooler than the other side of the pillow. But D'Lo Brown, man, another guy that I can't help but think, man, what could have been, for whatever reason. I mean, I shouldn't say for whatever reason. We know the reason. I feel so bad that all that happened with Draws, and I can't help but wonder, did that permanently derail his career? What would his career have looked like had that tragedy not happened? Because I don't think anybody ever put any sort of fault on D'Lo. Like, another universally beloved guy, total accident. But man, in an alternate universe, I love me some D'Lo, man. Everybody loves that bobblehead and the chest protector. That's good shit.
I used to love watching him. He'd make his entrance, man. He'd come down a ramp. He was just strutting his stuff. I often wonder, and I see D'Lo every once in a while, and I may ask him next time I see him if I remember this, but I don't know if it derailed his career in the eyes of Vince McMahon, for example, or anybody else that he worked with, perhaps. But I wonder what it did to him. Did it derail D'Lo? In other words, did he carry that guilt around with him? Was he hesitant? Did he start second guessing himself in the ring in order to not have another situation like that? That can derail your career. It depends on how D'Lo was able to handle it.
We've still got our main event to come, and Eric, it's an interesting match and story that's going to develop. We're going to have the involvement of Rikishi and Too Cool to try to even up the odds. So you're going to have Cactus Jack, The Rock, Rikishi, and Too Cool on one side, with Triple H, Sean Waltman, Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, and Perry Saturn on the other side. I, as a fan at the time, can admit that for whatever reason, I never really got into Too Cool, but I was sort of blown away to hear that my buddy Cassio, it was his favorite act. He absolutely loved Too Cool and wanted to be a part of that. He wanted to be in the room when that happened. And I just think about how silly some of that is and what really connects, because I know that a lot of times in wrestling, we take ourselves very seriously, especially in this more modern era. But when you really break down the Too Cool act, it's guys who were wearing goofy hats and goofy glasses and goofy clothes, dancing down to the ring, doing the worm, and then exposing a plus-size posterior and dancing it around in someone's face, and the place goes bananas. Like, I know that sometimes we overcomplicate this, Eric. We overthink this.
Sometimes.
How about wrestling can just be fun? Why don't you go out there and fucking dance and the whole crowd get with it? Like, I don't know why we don't think about wrestling like that more often. It feels like sometimes we just take it too seriously. Is that making sense to you, Eric?
Oh, 100% sense. And it's because we don't think about the crowd. We're thinking about the dirt sheets. We're thinking about 4-star ratings. We're thinking about whatever it is we're thinking about, getting over with the internet, hoping for that big cage match ranking. We're not thinking about the crowd. Again, how many times have while we're reviewing shows like this and we're looking at a match that Dave Meltzer says sucked and gave it 1 star, and the crowd's on their feet going nuts. It kind of goes back to what I was saying before. You've got such a small percentage of the audience that makes so much noise that unless you know better, you assume everybody thinks that way. And they don't. The crowd loved it. Cody Rhodes told me not long ago, a year or two ago, we were talking about something. And we were talking about the Hogan Sting thing in 97, right? And Cody said to me, and I'm paraphrasing all this, I don't want to put words in his mouth and force him to have to defend any of these comments. But essentially what Cody said is, Eric, I don't know how old he was in 1997, 10, 12, 14, whatever he was. He said, I'm at ringside. I'm watching that match, and I loved every bit of it. I had no idea that there was controversy until the next day. And that's one example. The finger poke would do another example. If you listen to guys like Dave Meltzer, it was the beginning of the end of WCW. Actually, it wasn't. It was the beginning of a record year, 1998 or whatever year it was. We had some of the highest ratings we ever had and financial success like we'd never experienced before. after the finger poke of doom. But if you listen to the dirt sheet narrative, the internet wrestling community, as they prefer to be called, they're really just dirt sheet marks. If you listen to them and go by that loudest voice on social media, it's horrible. And I think talent, in some cases, promoters, have lost sight of the fact that their jobs are to make sure everybody in that arena has a freaking awesome time.
Yes.
And you have to go back to Dusty's buffet thing. You have to give that audience enough of what they're looking for and a variety of what they're looking for, so that then when they leave the building and go, damn, that was fun, I can't wait to come back. As opposed to, this is awesome, because somebody's doing some crazy shit and busting their heads open. We've lost, I think, some promoters. Obviously, WWE is not falling victim to this. They're going the opposite way. They're making sure everybody has a great time so that more people come the next time. It's a very simple formula, by the way. It's no different than throwing a dinner party at your house, inviting 10 of your closest friends over, and you serve up an amazing meal. You have cocktails, you've got music, you got a nice, if you got a lake home with a beautiful patio overlooking the river and the lake, it's just, everybody's going to have a good time. So when you invite them over next time, guess what? Absolutely. And do you mind if I bring a friend? Right? It's just building it. But you got to make sure people have fun and are entertained. And sometimes we spend so much time, as you said, Conrad, and I agree, we take this shit so seriously that we forget to have fun.
Fun is the name of the game, and Mick Foley is not talking about fun here. He's cutting a hell of a promo, talking about the stakes here as he gets ready to put his career on the line at No Way Out. And he says, don't count him out tonight or in 20 days. He was never even supposed to be here because 15 years ago, he was told he wasn't even good enough to be in the business. And now he's ready to go 1-on-5, but he's not stupid enough to turn down Rock's vote of confidence. And he says he's going to WrestleMania. So we think when we're going to the break here, when we come back, it might be Cactus and Rock against 5 guys, or maybe it's Cactus 1-on-5, but we know it's going to be Rikishi and Too Cool. I like the storytelling of, hey, we don't know who's going to be his backup, but we know it's coming. Now we see the guys getting ready on the other side. What do you think about this view and this positioning? What I mean is, I've seen some criticism online of the WWE and the way they would shoot backstage vignettes. Like, I know when AEW first launched, there were some people who had used to work for WWE and they didn't like the way that looked at times. Was there a pet peeve of yours that you felt like WWE once upon a time under the Vince regime went to too often, and you thought, this just doesn't feel real or genuine, or it feels phony and I don't like it? Was there a shot that WWE did that just really rubbed you the wrong way?
Just about everything they did rubbed me the wrong way backstage.
Wow.
It just was so. Now the skits, highly produced stuff, there was some good stuff, right? There was some bad stuff, Katie Vick, but there was some good stuff, a lot of it. But the backstage interviews where you got your announcement, and to this day, it still gets under my skin. Like, if I was ever hired for a week to work in any wrestling company, the first thing I would attack would be the way they do interviews, including WWE to this day at some points. AEW is off the charts horrible, the way they produce their backstage interviews. They're doing it like they did them back in 1980, only with less talent, people with less ability. They're still talent. They just don't have that ability. The Gene Okerlund, I'm standing here with a so-and-so and coming into we're going to interview this, standing there, your stick man, your stick person in today's case is often, it's such a just boring, ineffective waste of freaking time. More often than not, talent would be better off not doing an on-camera promo than they are doing one, because the content that they're given, particularly under Vince, because Vince was ridiculous about this stuff, he had to approve every single word. And God forbid, 15 minutes before the show, because Vince McMahon demanded rewrites up until the very last minute, because he couldn't make up his mind what he really wanted. So he just kept making people throw more shit up against the wall until he found something that he liked. That was pretty much Vince's process, at least the process that I saw in the 4 months I was there. It was fucking insane. But he would literally, you take somebody that would spend 2 hours working on a promo, get it to Vince. It's a draft. It's a fucking draft. It's not meant to be published for commercial consumption. It's a draft. Just to make sure, Vince, in this case, we want to make sure that we're on the right track with this and you like the way it finishes. But if there was a comma missing or a word spelled wrong, because half the time these writers are backstage, I mean, they're under the gun. The clock is fucking ticking. Their talent's going out to cut this promo in 12 minutes, and you still haven't had it approved yet. And you don't know why they didn't like the first one you turned in. But now you have to write another one. And God forbid you forget to spell check it before Vince sees it. Otherwise, he'll get to one word that was mistyped or a comma that was missing, blow his fucking gasket, and toss it and make you go back and write another one. I saw a lot of that. And in the 4 months I was there, I saw a lot of that. More than I care to remember. I think I saw PTSD as a result of it. But the net of that is that talent would often get promos backstage, including the stick person who had no freaking clue what was going on because he didn't have time to get familiar with it, literally handing the talent and the announcer a script that was still warm from coming off the copy machine because it just got approved. And now you're asking them to make it feel real. It was insane. It was such a waste of time and talent. That's the one thing, can you tell? It still pisses me off a little bit when I see backstage interviews and segments that are so poorly produced that they don't accomplish anything. Telling you, say, oh, I got a promo on TV today. Yay. Like just by virtue of the fact that you're showing up on camera, somehow your stock goes up. In many cases, in some cases in particular, every time you open your mouth up, your stock goes down. The audience likes you less. You're less of an attraction. You're less of a brand. Your contract value far exceeds your real value. And part of it is because you're put into positions as a talent that you shouldn't be in. You shouldn't give people who aren't really comfortable on a mic standing there in a sterile environment with content that really doesn't matter. You've had no time to prepare. You have no time to figure out a way to make it your own. And you're not allowed to make it your own anyway, because if you don't repeat the exact words that were on the format or on the promo, you get an earful. It was such an unproductive way of doing things. And I still see it today. More so in other companies than in AEW, but it still happens. It's unfortunate because it really hurts the talent. It doesn't hurt anything else. It just hurts the talent and the overall feel for the product.
The crowd is going bananas for this. If you guys have never watched this with the sound, I want to encourage you, check it out. February 7th, 2000. You've got these brand new guys right off of WCW TV here. Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, and Perry Saturn. And they're teaming with two of the tippy top guys, the most over acts. I mean, we've got Sean Waltman, who's been the secret sauce of the NWO and DX. And of course, Triple H is running roughshod. He's one of the biggest, meanest, nastiest heels, and he's got the world title. And their opponents are The Rock, Cactus Jack, Rikishi, and Too Cool. And literally every time anybody does anything, fans are going bananas. I mean, this is supposed to be fun, and I don't remember, like when you really think about these big 5 and 10-man tags like this is supposed to be a clusterfuck. This is not supposed to be fun. but you don't know what to expect when you've got this many people out there and it looks like chaos and everyone's established and everyone's over. And man, an embarrassment of riches here for the WWF in early 2000.
It's interesting too, isn't it? Not that I want to spend a whole lot of time trying to get into Vince McMahon's head. But clearly Vince was committed to getting these guys over, talking about the Radicalz. They've been there a week. Eddie's got a broken arm, and look who he's in the ring with. I mean,
Yeah, they got The Rock and Triple H and Cactus Jack. Like,
with a very hot setup at the very beginning of the show. They spent 20 minutes setting the heat for this, getting people to look forward to it, building it. We saw a promo earlier on in the show. So they threaded this whole segment through the show to build anticipation. And they put these 4 guys from WCW, who supposedly Vince typically, always shit on those guys for quite a while before he gave them a real opportunity. He thrust all 4 of these guys into the most high profile position he could possibly put them in 7 days after they showed up. Fairly impressive.
I'm loving seeing this era of Cactus Jack. I know that he's ultimately not going to retire, but I loved Cactus Jack in the WWE. Were you surprised that, after seeing Vince require Mick Foley to be Mankind, were you surprised that he eventually allowed Mick to do Cactus Jack? That does feel like not a Vinceism. Vince always wants to own the IP. Were you surprised that he let Foley do Cactus Jack in WWE?
Not really. I mean, it does go against what we thought we knew of the grain of Vince McMahon. But I think Vince had a lot of respect for Mick. He may not have liked necessarily the Cactus Jack character because he didn't create it. I think that's a part of Vince. I think just about everything we look at with Vince over the years, even currently, is all about control. Vince is one of those people that just absolutely has to have control of everything around him. And the exception here, I think, was Vince was willing to compromise once he develops the respect for you. And I think Mick Foley, to his credit, earned that respect and that latitude. Another guy that I noticed that with was Chris Jericho. When I was in WWE as a talent, now it was before 2019, when I was there just as a talent, I'd be back in the dressing room getting ready for my segments, whatever, and I would see Chris Jericho and Brian Gewirtz going over whatever it is Chris was supposed to do that night in terms of verbiage. And Chris was right in the middle of it. And if there were things that he wasn't comfortable with, he was, I won't say aggressive. He wasn't unprofessional, but he was very assertive. And Chris was the only guy I saw in WWE while I was there as a talent that had that latitude. I'm sure others did. Steve Austin, Rock, whomever. Obviously, they always do. No matter what anybody tells you, they always have creative control. And anybody that tells you different has never been in the wrestling business. Period. End of conversation. But I saw Chris, and I think Mick Foley had that same level of respect.
It's interesting to take a look back and see what a period this was in pro wrestling, because, this is the era where ECW is brand new on TNN and they're full of optimism. Well, maybe not super full. We're 5 or 6 months in at this point, but by God, ECW's got TV, and WCW is about to reach out to Eric Bischoff and say, hey man, why don't we put the band back together? And we know you guys try to reset the deck here in April of 2000. It does feel like at this point, though, the die has been cast for both WCW and ECW to fail. We're on a death march for ECW. They've got less than a year left. WCW, not much better. They're going to be around in, I don't know, another 13 months, I guess. When you think about the year 2000, do you think that there were any if you had it to do over again, could you have changed anything that would have avoided the inevitable, or was it always going to wind up exactly how it did? In 2000, I'm asking.
No, and the biggest mistake, and I thought this is where you're going, one of the biggest mistakes I made personally in my life was agreeing to come back to WCW in 2000. That was, career-wise, that was a huge mistake on my part. Financially, it was good for me. I made a lot of money. But money's short term. You know, money, you end up spending that shit pretty quick. So the decision to go back in 2000 was just one of the biggest mistakes I made professionally, because there was no chance in hell that things were going to end up any different. They finally got rid of Ted Turner. Ted Turner was sitting in an office in a corner of CNN Center with no responsibilities and no influence. Ted Turner was the only one that wanted WCW in the entire company. And once he was gone, I didn't know that. I didn't know that Ted didn't have any power. Ted didn't even know he didn't have any power at the time. Read the book. It's amazing. And Ted woke up one day and went, wait a minute, my name's on the building, but I don't get to vote. Had I realized how much they minimized Ted Turner in 2000, I would have not gone back, because I thought I went back with, I don't want to say an asset, but with a friend in my corner, somebody that cared about the same thing I did. At least I could have a conversation with him. But that conversation never took place. So no, there was no changing. Nothing would have changed other than the fact that I would have not made the amount of money I did, which in the long run would have been just fine, probably better, because my career took a pretty good hit as a result of that. And it took me a year or so to kind of regain my footing. I wished I wouldn't have gone back. I wish I would have known then what I know now, but it is what it is. But nothing would have changed. Not a thing would have changed.
So what a moment this is. Just absolute chaos in the ring. You've got the new Age Outlaws down here with weapons. All of a sudden the lights go off. We get a new video, a new lighting effect. And here comes Paul Bearer wearing a red jacket, and it's the Big Red Machine. Kane is here. Man, what a class of characters that you've got here. Kane, Triple H, The Rock, Rikishi, Mick Foley, the New Age Outlaws, the Radicalz. This is quite a Hall of Fame casting crew here. What do you think of the creative? You know, when you've got all these bodies flying everywhere, and here comes Kane just choke slamming everybody in sight.
I think it's pretty exciting. I think it's, look at the crowd. Doesn't matter what I think. What does the crowd think?
Yeah,
they've been digging this from Jumpstart. That's the only thing that matters. My opinion, your opinion, Dave Meltzer's opinion, Vince McMahon's opinion, Tony Khan's opinion. Nobody's fucking opinion matters. The only opinions that matter are the people in the audience, and they loved it. Our jobs, as anybody's job who's a current promoter or producer, is to recognize, okay, what are the elements that it took to get people where they're at? What are they responding to? What is the psychology that they're responding to? Because if you can understand that, you can replicate it. If you don't understand why they're reacting the way they're reacting, because you really had nothing to do with it, you just got lucky, you're not going to be able to recreate that or rinse and repeat it. But if you understand the basic psychology and the basic elements and what it took for you to get to that moment, you can file those elements and figure out a way to use them again. You have to do it differently. 7 basic stories. Human beings have been telling the same basic stories since the beginning of storytelling time. The variations within those stories is what makes them interesting and feel fresh. But if you understand the elements of those stories and how to rinse and repeat them without looking like you doing the same things over and over again, the chances are you're going to be successful. So while I may not like the cluster of having all those bodies in the ring, because I like the visual dynamic and the storytelling and the psychology of two guys battling it out or two women battling it out, that's personally what I like the most. But if the audience is getting off on this stuff, I'm going to figure out a way to rinse and repeat it. At least attempt it.
Well, we're going to attempt to do something pretty fun next week here on the show, Eric. We're going to be talking about what if, and it's one of mine and your favorite things to do. We want to encourage you to join us here on the show next week. It's 83weeks.com. We're looking to solicit your ideas about the great what ifs in wrestling. And we've had some fun conversation preliminarily here, and Eric and I have talked about this a million different ways. Like, what if Buff Bagwell stuck with WCW and Scotty Riggs joined the NWO? Or what if Hulk Hogan wasn't the third man and it was someone else? Or what if Shawn Michaels did make the jump? There's a million what ifs in wrestling, and we want to hear from you. What are some of your biggest what ifs in wrestling? We're going to be talking about that next week here on the program, because that's what gets really interesting, Eric, is not to think about, and certainly we have had a lot of fun breaking down what did happen, but to think about what was possible that maybe we didn't see at the time. This will be a fun topic next week, Eric. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
I can't wait. And actually, I'm going to ask Derek Sabato to get me notes a little sooner than normal, because I really want to spend some time prepping for this one. I think this could be one of our better shows, and I'm looking forward to doing it.
In the coming weeks, we'll be talking about selling wrestling television. We're going to be doing another Ask Eric Anything. We'll be discussing Raven's Flock this year, stars that could have been. We'll even touch on WCW video games. A whole lot more coming your way this year on 83 Weeks. And Eric, you and I have been working on some pretty out there ideas. And is it just me, or does it feel like that some of these projects we've been working on, they're taking shape, and you and I are both getting pretty excited about it?
We are. There's a lot of good stuff going on. And it's, even being down there with you in Huntsville, I know we only had literally a few hours to really put our heads together and riff. But sometimes that's all it takes, is to focus on one idea that you're really excited about, or in this case, two, and just start moving forward. Momentum creates momentum. It's hard to create momentum, but once you do, and you get a little bit of it behind you, all of a sudden the ideas open up, your confidence goes up a little bit, you find yourself doing more, and it gets real exciting real fast. So those couple of days I spent down in Huntsville were very valuable. But yeah, we've got a couple of really cool things going on. We'll talk about it when the time comes, but we're getting close.
Fingers crossed. Stay tuned, boys and girls. Maybe some big news around the corner for Eric Bischoff in 83 Weeks. But in the meantime, what is your biggest what if? We want to hear from you. Join us on the conversation online. It's at 83 Weeks on Twitter and Instagram and anywhere else you enjoy your social media. But of course, your home for all things Eric Bischoff is 83weeks.com. It's totally free. That's our YouTube. And you want to be sure to not only hit the subscribe button, but turn on the notification bell, because Eric goes live all the time and you don't want to miss him the next time he's live. So make plans to join us, and we'll talk about what if right here next week on 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson here to tell you a little more about what AdFreeShows.com is all about. Get early, ad-free access to more than a dozen of your favorite wrestling podcasts every single week, starting at just $9. That's less than 20 cents an episode each month. And yes, you can listen to them all directly through Apple Podcasts or your regular podcast apps. How easy is that? Ad-Free Shows also has thousands of hours worth of bonus content and docuseries like Title Chase, Eric Fires Back, Conversations with Conrad, and The Insiders. Plus new series like The Book with David Crockett, Monday Mailbags with Mike Chioda and Nick Patrick, and a whole lot more. And you want to talk about early? You can't get any earlier than listening to the shows live. You can be a part of the live studio audience as we record the podcast. Plus, ride shotgun alongside your favorite childhood heroes for live watch-alongs, Q&As, and other interactive experiences every single month. Come on now, see for yourself what thousands of other wrestling fans from around the world have discovered
that AdFreeShows.com is the best value in wrestling. Check it out today. And hey, when you do, the first week is completely free. AdFreeShows.com.